that there was a reason this was happening to us, and there was a reason this was happening to me. Now, don't mistake this BS phrase, because a lot of people will utter it to you when you're struggling with infertility. Everything happens for a reason. That's crap, okay? Infertility happens, but it's how you deal with it that matters. I knew I wouldn't have made it this far without my best friend's understanding and support, but I sat there talking to my husband and I said, how many women and men are out there who don't have a friend who's gone through this, who can't totally understand this journey? So I told them that with the job that I had and the platform that I had, that I needed to go public with our story. So with his blessing, I shared our struggles, hoping that other people who are going through the same thing would hear it and not feel so alone. I went on the air with my story. I cried a lot. I don't think I wore waterproof mascara that day. I think I was still a rookie at that point. That's always fun, sharing your story with a bunch of people when you're doing the ugly cry. The ugly cry that, by the way, I will probably do a few more times today. I did not wear any mascara today, not even waterproof. It had been a year since my miscarriage, and the phones immediately started ringing. Women who were crying with me because they were going through the exact same thing and they thought they were alone. Women who were crying because they had been through the same thing years before, and hearing me talk about it took them right back to that place. But through the tears, they shared stories with me of the beautiful children they had, and they told me that one day I would have beautiful children of my own. And then there were the women who called with their advice of wrapping a piece of toast in aluminum foil and putting it in between their mattress and box spring. If I had been smart, starting that day, I should have started writing down all of these crazy stories, and I could have taken yours as well, and we could have published a book of all the nonsense that people say to us. But the helpful and supportive calls more than outweighed the bad, and they gave me hope. I realized there was a whole community of women and men out there who were going through the same thing. I also realized that everything wasn't perfect, and that was okay. I was textbook type A personality, and just admitting the problem was a huge step for me. Up until then, I hadn't called a fertility doctor because, what? That would be admitting something was wrong, that I couldn't do it myself. Going public with the problem, admitting I needed help, these were all things that I was not used to doing. So I went to the fertility clinic and started testing. And I don't know if you've done this before, the first day I think they drew half of the blood that was in my body, right? And then they tested my husband and they drew like 2 vials, and he said, "Oh, my arm." I said, "Technician, can you show him how many vials of blood I had just had taken?" But the blood work revealed that I had tested positive for blood clots. I had a folic acid deficiency, meaning I didn't absorb it well. And the biggest issue of all, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. I don't know if anybody else is suffering from PCOS here, but I'll tell you right now, it's a real bitch. I felt pretty good armed with all this knowledge, and we started fertility treatments. My doctor said we'd be pregnant within 3 months, and I was. After my second cycle of IUI, we were over the moon. The nightmare was over. We had finally jumped over all the hurdles, any cliche you want to use. I mean, that was it. End of this awful chapter in our lives. So 1.5 years after my first pregnancy, we had finally cracked the code and I was pregnant again. I told my closest friends early on that we were pregnant. We had already had an ultrasound. We had seen the baby's heartbeat. I had been given my due date, and of course, as that happens, you start planning. Jumped into planning mode for our summer baby. It was New Year's Eve, and another one of my friends was conspicuously avoiding alcohol. Not to say that she's a booze hound, but New Year's, I mean, doing the math, I was excited to think that our due dates had to be close. Flash forward to a couple weeks later, I was at my 8-week ultrasound. I still remember the exam room and the tiles on the ceiling and waiting for what seemed like an eternity for the ultrasound technician to say something. I looked over when I heard her sniffling, and I saw her wipe a tear from her cheek. She could no longer find the baby's heartbeat. Here comes the ugly cry, right? Gosh, I stared at those ceiling tiles and the cheeks. My cheeks just burned with tears. And I felt myself falling. And that feeling, it couldn't be happening again. I later learned after my miscarriage that my friend and I were due the same week, and that we were both supposed to have girls. Oh, and that ultrasound was on my birthday. On my birthday, that was a good idea. Quick aside, I think this is why, still to this day, I hate Katherine Heigl. The day before my ultrasound, my friends and I went to celebrate my birthday, and we went to 27 Dresses, and I did not want to see that movie. But I went because I was happy. I was so happy with life. And it was a terrible movie. Oh, it was awful. And so, of course, what do? The next day when you have an ultrasound and your baby doesn't have a heartbeat, you blame it on Katherine Heigl. Oh. So, why did I think having an ultrasound on my birthday was a good idea? Well, it was because I was optimistic. You don't schedule an ultrasound on your birthday if you think you're going to get bad news. So I took a couple days off after that. And my boss told me, take the rest of the week off. But once again, what does Jen do? I go into work. The first morning I went back, there was someone sitting at my desk typing up the news, which was my job. And I was frustrated. I explained, I told the boss that I would be in today. Well, the boss said I should show up just in case. Just in case I'm fine. Please get out of my seat. I'm going to do my job. The first news story that I sat down to edit was about a man who had been arrested for beating his infant son to death. Why? Why? When you stare up at the sky and you're like, why is this happening to me? How much more can I take? A story like that is just awful for anyone to hear, but when you're struggling with infertility, it's just unbearable to read. I couldn't even finish reading the story, much less read it on the air. That was not going to happen. So I told my coworker that I had to go home and thank you for coming in, and I stayed home for the rest of the week. I lost it, and after that, I went through a period where I lost all hope. The bottom dropped out, and I felt like I just kept falling. One of the problems with suffering a miscarriage is that it's similar to postpartum depression. You're shedding all of these pregnancy hormones, and you're already in a bad place, and it doesn't help. So after a while, I would just go to work and put on a mask and play the role I needed to play, and then I would just go home and lie in bed all day, until I had to go to work the next morning. I didn't realize it at the time, but with perspective, I was in a deep depression, and I was in a bad place. I just didn't want to try anymore, and it's so difficult for me to even explain it. I look back at that person and I don't recognize her. It wasn't me. And of course, to make matters worse, my husband wanted to fix everything. I think that's a common theme in couples. If the woman is upset, the husband is the fixer. And a fixer does not mix well with someone who does not want to be fixed or helped. Making matters worse was every milestone reached by my friend who was still pregnant. I so wanted to be happy for her, but registries and baby showers and decorating her nursery and all things pink were just haunting me, because it was like I was looking at the mirror image of the exact opposite of what I was. Oh, and another friend had become pregnant. And another friend was pregnant with triplets, naturally. No fertility treatments. The odds of that are astronomical, but it happened. Naturally, right? I had hit rock bottom and I finally realized I needed to talk to someone because it wasn't going to get any better. And thank God for IAS in St. Louis because they were a lifesaver for me. And my husband and I saw a wonderful counselor, a doctor who taught me some great coping skills, like you don't have to go to a baby shower if you don't want to. But being type A, I felt like I had to do it. It seems like a simple concept, but she said, send a gift, send a note, say you're sorry you can't make it. That was like revolutionary to me, but it so helped me get through those months when my friend was pregnant and I wasn't. She also taught me a powerful mantra. I am in the right blank. I am in the right place, in the right job, in the right house, with the right partner. I had to repeat this story many times to myself as I did have to go back to work and I did have to read stories about horrible things that had happened to babies, or I had to hear stories from people who weren't even trying to get pregnant and oh my gosh, we just did, it's such a surprise. Or my coworker who knew that I was struggling to get pregnant and she was headed off for her 20-week ultrasound. She came into our office and somebody said, what do you think it's gonna be, a boy or a girl? And she said, oh my gosh, if it's not a girl, I'm just gonna die. And I felt like there were 1,000 daggers shot into my heart at that moment, but I'm in the right place, the right husband, the right house. Just had to keep repeating that in my head. Forget everyone else's position. I realized that I had to be okay with my position. I had to love my life as it was. And as we see even more now with Facebook and social media, it's hard not to compare your situation to someone else. Sometimes you just have to hit unfollow in your newsfeed. Sometimes you have to say, we're still friends on Facebook, but I can't see any more of your baby pictures. I had taken a few months off from fertility treatments after my miscarriage to take care of myself, but I was ready to go. Diet, check. Exercise, check. Acupuncture, check. Right medications, check. I went back to the doctor for my next round of IUI, and it was canceled because apparently I did everything too well and I was too fertile. Like, what the crazy, what? How am I too fertile? How do I go from being infertile to being too fertile? But they said there was too great a risk for multiples. I was out of my mind. Now there's a chance I'll be too pregnant? To a woman struggling with infertility, you're like, I don't care. But my doctor explained that we needed to cancel and I would have to wait another month. Next round, my final round of IUI, not too fertile, not too infertile, but just fertile enough. It was like the Goldilocks and the 3 bears of intrauterine insemination. Third time's a charm, right? I became pregnant, but my HCG levels were low, and I was warned that it was unlikely that I would have a viable pregnancy. I had a 3rd miscarriage. After this final round of IUI, we were looking at IVF. And if you had told me in the beginning we would be doing IVF, I would have told you you were out of your mind. But that's the funny thing with this infertility journey. You go from point A to point B to point C to point D to point E to point F. But if you start at A and go to F, sometimes it's a little jarring. But it all made sense at that point. It was just the next step in our travels. At this point, I wanted to know more about what was going on, and as my counselor said, IVF is like taking your car for this diagnostic test. They pop the hood and see what's going on. I did just compare my ovaries to a car engine, but it totally made sense. And I was actually excited to figure out what was going on with my body. What was going on was that I had some rusty eggs, and my PCOS was far worse than we had imagined. But I dove in, started prepping myself for treatment, acupuncture, strict diet, drugs, metformin, and heparin shots for my blood clotting. Now, if you don't know what heparin is, it's a blood thinner. It helps prevent blood clots. But the problem is, in giving myself these shots in the lower abdomen, when I ended up hitting a vein, it looked like a boxer went 10 rounds on my stomach. And by the way, before this, when I first had my blood drawn that one day when they took half of the blood out of my body, I couldn't even look at the needles. I just looked the other way and said, "Tell me when it's done." But I had to give myself these heparin shots. Back up. My husband had to give me these heparin shots, but one night, he wasn't home. He had an event, and it had to be done. So I was like, okay, I can do this, I can do this. And I just stuck the needle in. I was like, wow, another thing I can do. I can do this. But even as bruised and battered as I was, suffering those 3 miscarriages, I was more ready than I had ever been. My IVF retrieval netted 24 eggs. 24, right? That's pretty awesome. But with PCOS, the problem is never really quantity, but quality. And after 5 days, we were left with just 5 viable eggs. 5 eggs. The doctor picked the best 2 of the bunch. Let me see if I can pull this up for you. It's not just another bump in the journey, right? There we go. Aren't they pretty? The doctor picked the best 2 of the bunch, implanted the 2, and we held our breath, waiting for just one good egg. I shouldn't have looked at the picture. Finn was born in June of 2009, and it's when I held this baby for the first time that I realized that this journey had all led up to this one moment. I'm in the right place, at the right time, with the right husband, with a baby more perfect than I had ever imagined. And I had lots of years to dream, so that baby was already pretty damn perfect in my mind. We tried 1.5 years later with our 3 remaining embryos with a frozen IVF cycle, but it wasn't successful. My doctor, again, advised that the only way we'd be able to get pregnant again was through IVF. My PCOS was far worse than he had previously imagined, and he said we'd have a less than 2% chance of getting pregnant on our own. I told my husband that the thought of another IVF round was just exhausting to me in every way. And the PCOS was raging worse than it had ever been. And I finally came to peace with the fact that he would be our only child. I mean, how could I look at him and say that he wasn't enough? I decided that I was just going to take care of my PCOS because, as you know, PCOS is something that you have to deal with for the rest of your life. And I just needed to get my body to a healthy place. And of course, because we needed another miracle in our life, in November of 2012, we welcomed Nora. No heparin shots, no metformin necessary. When I had my son, so many people made the same remark: parenting is the most important job you'll have, but there's no special secret club here. And this infertility journey, life not going according to plan, admitting things aren't perfect, giving up control, asking for help, feeling what heartache is, prepared me for parenthood more than I ever would have thought. When I first went public with my pregnancy loss, I shared it for the other women going through the same thing at the same time, but what I didn't expect was all of the women who had been through it before me. At first I thought their support was nice, but they did not know what was going to happen to me. Do not tell me I'm going to be a mother. You do not know that for certain. But they did. When we were in the thick of our infertility struggles, I just wanted to see that there was going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. I said, I know if I can be assured that there's that light, I can just keep going. I used to tell my husband that all the time. But I'm standing here before you today to say that I have made it out of the tunnel. So many of my friends have made it out of the tunnel. And you will too. If you want to be a parent and you have that love in your heart, you will be. I don't know which train tracks your train will be on. I don't know how long your trip will be. Some are longer than others. But we all made it out and saw the light at the end of the tunnel because we wanted to be parents, bottom line. You'll hear so many different speakers today, and everyone has a different story. And they're each here to let you know that you're not alone. And do not give up hope. You are in the right place, with the right partner, with the right support system around you, and with this many people here cheering you on. You will find the light at the end of the tunnel, and you will become parents. Thank you.